So now, in typical MindShock fashion, we'll be continuing the rabbit hole in the branch off to Nancy Krebs' testimony, which I believe is what the judge referred to here to Alex Hunter, who happened to resign or retire within weeks of this testimony, which is also coincidental, I guess. And this will lead us to, of course, Fleet and Priscilla Whites, the Whites who we just covered briefly in the early episodes, and we'll be continuing to examine this rabbit hole. Okay, so this brings us to the infamous Nancy Krebs account. Now, obviously the hardcore researchers know about Krebs, but a lot of people who just have an overview of the JonBenet Ramsey case, they may not know about the testimony of one Nancy Krebs. I believe this is who the judge is referring to as far as witnesses who came forward or testimony regarding all the corruption. But let's look at the official narrative, the coincidence theorist narrative. Obviously, how often is the official narrative turn out to be true? I mean, turns out not too often, but maybe it's true here. Again, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. So on the JonBenet Ramsey .shoutwiki.com, here's just a quick overview of the official narrative, but it might still offer some clues. Nancy Krebs, a woman who claimed to have been raped by John Ramsey and Fleet White, as well as Fleet White's elderly father. I mean, how often does someone come out of the woodwork with these kinds of claims? If she was just looking for attention, would she have just kept it to John Ramsey and possibly Fleet White? Or just Fleet White? But she's also involving Fleet White's elderly father. That's an interesting detail there. Again, I'm not claiming anything she's saying is true, but it's interesting because in all these other cases, I mean, even against Trump, like a lot of the people coming out with allegations, I mean, they're not necessarily coming out against allegations against him and his friend's father and all this. I mean, it's one thing to come out with this for attention or whatever, but these kinds of details, all I'm saying is they might possibly warrant at least some kind of legitimate investigation. She claimed that John Ramsey had visited her in California when she was a young girl, chained her up, and sodomized her. She also claimed that John Ramsey had filmed these encounters and made money off of it, and that the Whites had held parties with large groups of pedophiles. Krebs also claimed that her own mother was present at the Whites' Christmas party on the night of JonBenet's death. Krebs' allegations were thoroughly investigated and determined to be false. Like, by who? By the people alleged to have been involved? I mean, this is what coincidence theorists don't understand. Again, I'm not claiming any of this is true. But when the guards investigate themselves, like, who will guard the guards? Like, if the people alleged of the crimes, if the accused investigate themselves and find themselves innocent, maybe they really are innocent. But all these gullible goofs out there, they don't understand what a conflict of interest is. Because if there is widespread corruption, as this judge is alleging, if that's true, again, I'm not saying it is, but if that's true, and there's something to these allegations, how would you expect these same people to find themselves guilty? I mean, you'd have to bring in, I don't know, internal affairs, maybe? I mean, a non-corrupt agency of some kind, independent investigators, not associated. I mean, maybe even from another country. I mean, I don't know. Like, you can't, obviously, you're not going to have the guilty parties investigate themselves if they're all complicit. Now, again, a lot of people who doubt Nancy Krebs, individually, there might not be enough evidence, and I'm not saying even collectively there is, but when the people that just dismiss Nancy Krebs outright, if there's some form of validity or truth, however small, when you couple it with this other interview here or assortments of coffee table talks with this judge, if those are legitimate and they can be determined to be, it's very, very interesting that they kind of sort of match up here in some way about these parties. And again, rumors of this, there have been rumors of this going back a long time. Again, I'm not alleging they're true, but it's interesting because in other true crime cases, it turns out that early rumors were true. Again, I'm not saying that's the case here, but in other cases, in other situations, the rumors just don't come out of the ether. They come from something. Police discovered that Krebs was the subject of a missing persons report from California and had claimed to be a witness in at least 2 other homicide investigations. Now, here's the thing. if she's involved in a criminal element and these circles of criminals and pedophiles and murderers, why? I mean, is it really like if she's telling the truth? I mean, how does it discredit her if she's seen other crimes? If she's claiming to be involved in these circles of criminals and possibly some kind of black market snuff films and all this stuff, if those criminals are murderers, I mean, perhaps she was a witness in other. I mean, this is so weird, as if you're using that to discredit. I mean, maybe she wasn't. Maybe she made everything up. But to just dismiss it by saying, oh, yeah, she also claimed to see other murders. I mean, if a gang member comes in with info on murders and they also have info on other murders, I mean, it's not that surprising if they're constantly around murder, as they're claiming to be. Again, they might not be honest, but that, to dismiss it on those grounds, I mean, how silly can you get? Now, here are the wrinkles in the story. Support from DA Alex Hunter. Krebs' story was broken in the media in Boulder Daily Camera interview with then DA Alex Hunter. Hunter stated that Krebs' story was very believable and referred to it as a breakthrough in the case. Though he mentioned Fleet White by name, Hunter neglected to mention John Ramsey's role in the story. Prior to Hunter's public statements of support for Nancy Krebs, Fleet White had been an outspoken critic of Alex Hunter and had been campaigning for his removal from the DA's office, which is also curious. Police investigation of Krebs' claims. According to the police, Boulder police spent about 11 weeks investigating the allegations, which included conducting 22 interviews, reviewing medical and psychological records, reviewing photographs and recordings, consulting with a forensic psychiatrist, and comparing the allegations against physical evidence with current knowledge of the case. As a result, Boulder police and prosecutors working on the case have concluded that other than the woman's statements, there is no evidence to support this theory of JonBenet's murder. That's interesting, though, because that's an interesting way to phrase it as well, because that proof that it's not true? No, it is not. They're just saying they have no physical evidence to corroborate the story. They're not even necessarily saying she's not credible, but I mean, this was in a May 15th, 2000 press release, so this is fairly early on, within a few years she came forward, but Detective Steve Thomas, who had resigned from the case at that point, said it was unbelievable that Alex Hunter leaked and smeared Fleet White and his family with the story that has no grounds whatsoever. And again, even if there's zero corroborating evidence, that doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. Obviously, you can't claim it is true, but if there's no evidence to the contrary. Prosecutor Mike Kane, who was working for Hunter's office, reportedly called Hunter's secretary, confused as to why Hunter had gone publicly with the claims, despite knowing that Krebs was a, in quotation, goofball. Here's the thing, though. If these notes from meetings with a judge have any kind of validity, if Hunter and all these other people are involved, and if they're even having disputes with each other over the flavor of satanic psychic attacks, I mean, yeah, it's really weird. It's difficult to make heads or tails of all this without falling for logical fallacies. I mean, obviously the Dunning-Kruger crowd, the authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists, they're going to grasp desperately for their appeal to incredulity logical fallacies. Like, with religious fervor, they're going to grasp them and hold on to them. But if we're not falling for logical fallacies, because if this is all true, and I'm not alleging it is, but if it is, how do you find out it's true? Because if you just dismiss it, and if it is true, you'll never find out. Fleet White commented on the Krebs fiasco in a 2014 radio interview. Quote, "Clearly the only reason that the Boulder Daily Camera printed the story is because Alex Hunter had endorsed her credibility, and that was certainly borne out later in our conversations with Daily Camera reporters," end quote. And you know, another weird thing is, like, if you're Fleet White, are you still giving interviews in 2014 over a 96 murder case? I mean, does anybody find that slightly weird, especially if you don't want to be in the public eye? I don't know what to make of that. Later in 2000, the Whites brought an action in district court to release all of the investigative records from the Krebs investigation. The court released the transcript of Krebs police interviews, but no other investigative files. So that's a curiosity on so many levels here. Because first of all, those that say, okay, if the Whites were guilty, why would they want a public release of all the records? Now, if they're innocent, they might want that to show that they're innocent, right? But if they're guilty, would they be fighting for a release? Again, maybe. It depends on whether the fix is in or not. They might also, some people allege they were just curious, as to what they had gathered on them, because since the Whites hadn't been arrested for anything, they must have known that there was no actual damning evidence. But perhaps they wanted to get ahead of it, so they wanted it released so that way they can ensure that no real evidence would ever come to light. So that doesn't tell us a lot there, but just from the surface, you would think they probably wouldn't want it released. But then again, if there is an active cover-up and they want to stay ahead, perhaps they would want to release it. I don't know. But is it also curious that the court only released the initial police interviews, but no actual investigative files? So they don't know what was the result of any investigations, whether they found everything she said to be demonstrably false, or maybe they did find some kind of evidence to back this up, and they said they didn't. What would that prove? And the Whites went to district court again in 2014 to release all the investigative files. The Boulder Police Department and the DA opposed the release of those records. Does anybody else find this weird, though? Because if it really has no credibility, why not release them? I mean, it's just a little weird, unless they're thinking they're protecting Krebs, but if she was already supposedly discredited as a crazy person, why would it matter if they could at least back up the fact that they ruled her crazy, if that's what they did? I mean, none of this really makes any sense, no matter how you look at it. It doesn't really make sense. I mean, as recently as 2014, the Whites are going to district court and doing interviews. What does that mean? That is almost stranger than this whole crazy conspiracy theory to me. I mean, it's just so weird. Like, why are they still going on about this? So let's look at the Whites write-up on JonBenetRamsey.pbworks.com, the JonBenet Ramsey Case Encyclopedia. Pretty good resource here. The Fleet White Jr. theory. Who is Fleet White Jr.? Fleet and Priscilla White were very close friends of the family with the Ramseys, in part because they had two children similar in age, Burke and JonBenet Ramsey. So why do some suspect Fleet White motive? The predominant theory, articulated by self-proclaimed detective Keith Andrews, is that Fleet White may have been motivated by jealousy towards John Ramsey, but others think that Fleet White may have been a pedophile. Means, because Fleet White was a close family friend who knew JonBenet well, most theories believe he was able to rely on this to get JonBenet out of bed and into the basement without her being alarmed. Opportunity. The Whites lived only 1.2 miles or 4 minutes from the Ramseys and had both a key as well as invited access to the house, both on the night of the December 23rd party and on the morning of December 26th. Many Fleet White theories make use of these in explaining how Fleet White was able to plan the crime and possibly covered up evidence or deliberately contaminated the crime scene. No other close friend of Ramsey's had quite the same degree of opportunity. That's a good point there. So we might not have a good motive, but means and opportunity, they seem to be there. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything either, but of all their friends, I mean, I still find the Steins a little bit unusual, and the Fernies, but again, I've gone over them in the neighborhood podcast episode, as well as going over the Christmas party guest list and all of that, but focusing here on the Whites. I might have to do a dedicated episode on the Whites just because there's actually quite a bit of information on their saga in relation to the Ramseys, falling out, whatever, and even more background info, but I'm just going to focus here just on this. Exculpatory evidence favoring Fleet White Jr., cleared by Boulder Police Chief on April 16th, 97. City of Boulder issued a press release stating, in response to media inquiries and to clarify inaccurate statements, Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe has the following statement: Mr. and Mrs. Fleet White Jr. are not suspects in the JonBenet Ramsey murder investigation. They are considered key witnesses. The Boulder Police Department appreciates the full cooperation they received from the Whites since the beginning of the investigation. I feel this response is necessary due to the inaccurate portrayal of Mr. and Mrs. White in certain media publications. No DNA match. Internet poster Jay Yells has deduced from documents shown in the Tracy documentary that Fleet White and Priscilla White have been cleared on DNA. And again, just constantly going back, nobody has been cleared with the latest gen technology. Rebuttal of Keith Andrews' theory. Internet poster Jay Yells has posted a point-by-point rebuttal of Fleet White did it theory promulgated by self-proclaimed detective Keith Andrews. We're not going to get into that. Incriminating evidence against Fleet White Jr. Timeline. Internet poster Mame has posted a timeline related to Fleet White. This is still a work in progress whose accuracy and completeness will improve over time. Another timeline has been posted here. Strange behavior following JonBenet Ramsey's death. Self-proclaimed detective Keith Andrews has detailed numerous instances of odd or suspicious behavior by Fleet White in the aftermath of JonBenet Ramsey's death. And even if all of this is true, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because if he didn't initially suspect John Ramsey and then he began to, that could possibly account for that as well. Again, we're not going to go into that now because we're kind of focused on the Nancy Krebs aspect. So the Nancy Krebs story. Nancy Krebs reported that as a child, she had been the victim of sexual abuse by distant relatives of Fleet White Jr. and his father, but also by John Ramsey. She further reported being prostituted for pornography. And I believe, was her earliest interview February 22nd, 2000? That is listed here, Detective Tom Trujillo. Nancy Krebs Police Department interview. So it's dated February 22nd, 2000. And there's another interview May 10th, 2000. And there's also, okay. So an internet poster known as Logan apparently looked through the California sex offender registry and he found a Johnny Ramsey. He stated this: I believe Uncle Johnny Ramsey was the child molester registered on the California sex offender registry. He was in California during the time Nancy Krebs mentioned. Okay, so was this a different John Ramsey? So, I mean, wow. Yeah, so he's listed in the register as Johnny Ramsey, but the middle name is B, and his date of birth listed here is June 21st, 1959. So apparently it is a different John Ramsey, because even though they have the first initial, the middle name is the same, JonBenet's father, apparently his listed birthday is December 7th, 1943. So, yeah, this is why, again, things aren't necessarily a black and white logical fallacy. It could be a false dichotomy. So if she was abused by the Fleet White the White family, Fleet White and his father possibly, and there's also another John Ramsey here, especially if she's in an extreme state of duress and as a child, she might not have recognized that it was a different John Ramsey. So let's look at a summary here because, I mean, it is a little bit disturbing. I don't want to go through point by point every word she said in her testimony, but just going over a summary here by Samar Candy on the JonBenet subreddit. A woman's story of sex abuse. Nancy Krebs, DA pursues new Ramsey lead. Hunter asks police to investigate woman's story of sex abuse by Barry Hartman, camera staff writer, February 25th, 2000. DA Alex Hunter has turned over new information to Boulder police and the FBI that he says could provide a major breakthrough in solving the 3-year-old JonBenet Ramsey murder case. The information is from testimony and documents provided voluntarily by a 37-year-old California woman who was brought forward by Boulder attorney Lee Hill. The woman said she suffered a lifetime of sexual and physical abuse beginning at age 3. Her story, if true, could mean the Ramsey case is tangled in sex abuse and involves more people than originally thought. Hunter said he finds the woman to be very believable. Boulder police detectives, however, aren't so sure. Even if only 15% of what she says is true, Hunter said, this case warrants investigation, and if Boulder cops don't want to do it, I will take the case to the U.S. Attorney. Police Chief Mark Beckner said Thursday, though our detectives did not find her to be credible, we are taking what she has said seriously. I'm interested in finding the truth no matter where it leads us. Beckner said the first thing his detectives will do is perform a thorough background check of the woman and meet with her therapist of 10 years in an attempt to corroborate her story. Hill, who is a former San Diego County Deputy DA and former Special Assistant U.S. Attorney and is experienced in investigative work, said, quote, she is among the most credible witnesses I have ever interviewed, end quote. So that's actually interesting that Hill, who's not from Boulder, Hill is from San Diego County, DA San Diego County, and a former Special Assistant U.S. Attorney. So he's saying she's credible. He is representing the woman in her decision to give information to authorities. The woman has described to police years of sexual and physical abuse in California homes at the hands of adults who stayed at holiday and other parties after other guests had left for the evening. Then she said another party, one of sexual abuse for the gratification of a select group of adults, would begin. In talking to detectives, the woman draws parallels between sexual techniques used at those sessions and the physical evidence of garroting that investigators found on the body of JonBenet Ramsey. The woman told detectives she believes JonBenet was killed accidentally when the asphyxiation technique used to stimulate an orgasmic response during a child sex and porno party went too far. The woman told police she knows firsthand about asphyxiation choking to produce a sexual response because it had been done to her when she was a child. The woman said in her experience, little girls were dressed provocatively and trained to say provocative things such as, "It's a pleasure to please you." She told police when girls did not perform as expected, they were struck on the head. That was because their hair covered the wound. A big night for such parties was Christmas night, she said. Over the years, she said many parties were held then because a large number of cars around a house did not arouse suspicion in the neighborhood, and the children had a full week to heal from their wounds before returning to school. I mean, this is really dark stuff. If she did make it up, I mean, it's so disturbing at the logic. How, I mean, that is pretty logical. I mean, the amount of cars, the time off from school, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's just, I mean, it's, yeah, this is bizarre. Or maybe this all did happen to her, but she was mistaken that either John Ramsey was involved, or it was a different John Ramsey, a Johnny Ramsey, and that maybe it was the Fleets, maybe it was Fleet White and his father, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was other people. Maybe she's mistaken about that. I don't know. Again, let's not fall for false dichotomies. JonBenet Ramsey's death occurred overnight, Christmas '96. The autopsy report concluded she suffered a blow on the head and was strangled. The woman said she knows the Ramseys through the Fleet White family. She said the godfather to her mother is Fleet White Sr., 86 of California. Fleet White Jr. of Boulder and John Ramsey were close friends until the death of JonBenet. White, or rather until the funeral, right? In the days their falling out was after the funeral. White Jr. was with John Ramsey when JonBenet's body was found in the basement of the Ramseys' Boulder home. I mean, that's another red flag for many people. White Jr. has since been crusading for Hunter's ouster from this case for refusing to prosecute the Ramseys. Ramsey attorney Brian Morgan declined comment. Fleet White could not be reached Thursday. Police cleared White as a suspect in April '97. Attorney Hill said that the woman came forward because she was fearful for her life. She came to believe that people involved in child sexual abuse in California were becoming suspicious that she might try to talk with authorities. Hill said her main reason, however, was to try to save other innocent victims who can't speak for themselves from further sexual abuse. The woman and her therapist of 10 years, Mary Bienkowski, saw Hill being interviewed on Fox television about a deposition he had taken of John Ramsey in a libel suit against a supermarket tabloid. They decided to contact him. The camera's efforts to reach Bienkowski have been unsuccessful. Hill, struck by what he heard, traveled to San Luis Obispo near Los Angeles on February 11th. He spent 5 hours interviewing both the woman and her therapist, and he videotaped supporting documents, which included personal notes, cards, and family photographs that the woman says are from the Whites, both senior and junior. Hill recounted details of the interview. You know, it's also curious that the actual investigative files have never been released, only the interview. So what does that say? Is there evidence that that these people are all in the same photographs? Obviously, that's not evidence of any kind of an abuse, but it does lend some credibility that at least she knew all these people, and this part of a story might be true. Hill recounted the details of the interview to Hunter in a meeting February 16th. With him was Steven Singular, a Denver author who has pursued the Ramsey case for 3 years and is convinced the killing is linked to child sexual abuse. Both men expressed to Hunter intense frustration about the reluctance of police to consider evidence that deviated from their theories. The woman called Hill again Saturday, and he arranged for her to fly to Denver. He picked her up at 12:30 a.m. Sunday at Denver International Airport and found safe housing for her. Is that a weird time to fly into an airport? Midnight, after midnight. Hunter immediately, unless it was last, or that was the first time he reached out. I mean, I don't know. Or she called him, and what time did he call? So if she called him and wanted to come as soon as possible, I guess maybe that's not weird. Hunter immediately tried to arrange for detectives to interview the woman. 2 detectives interviewed her at 3 p.m. Tuesday for nearly 5 hours. It was during that interview that Hill learned Boulder police had received a missing persons report on the woman. A relative of the woman filed the report with San Luis Obispo authorities, who called Boulder police. Boulder police, Hill said, responded that she was in Boulder and would be interviewed by detectives at 3 p.m. Tuesday. They also told San Luis Obispo police she was with Lee Hill. I couldn't believe it, Hill said. We had told police her life was in danger, and they tell everyone where she is and what she is doing. That is kind of insane. I mean, does that in and of itself, regardless of whether she's credible or not, the fact that people are afraid of what she might say, is that proof of some kind of wide conspiracy going all the way to California as well? I mean, this is all insane. Police Chief Beckner said he thought it was his department's responsibility to respond to the missing persons report. Hill says police should have asked the witness whether she wanted them to respond. So she's an adult. She's 37 years old, and someone filed a missing persons report? The Ramsey case has been quiet for the last several months following a 13-month grand jury investigation that prosecutors said did not find enough evidence to bring an indictment in the case. So, yeah, I mean, it is curious, because if she said Uncle Johnny... So is she not claiming that this particular John Ramsey? So she did not name John Ramsey. She named an Uncle Johnny who's a different John Ramsey at a different age. Here's another article. This is by B.J. Plaskett, Boulder Journalist. Nancy Krebs by B.J. Plaskett, Daily Times Call in 2000. The Times Call, meanwhile, has learned that the woman's story includes allegations that when she was between the ages of 6 and 12 and living in California, she and another female child close to her age were taken on summer road trips up the West Coast by 2 adults. Those trips, the source said, included stops in Oregon, Washington, and Canada. It was during those trips, usually taken in August, that the woman and the other little girl were assaulted and photographed by other adults. According to the source, the trips usually went to the same towns and ended with the assaults by the same people each year. Those sites included small remote towns in both California and Oregon, the Times Call has learned. On one site was a remote ranch in Oregon where outbuildings were used as sets for pornographic films featuring children. According to the source, the woman's allegations also included the following. In addition to the female child taken with her on the summer road trips, the woman reported that 2 other children of similar age, a boy and girl, were also victimized by some of the same adults. The woman was assaulted during at least 1 trip to Nevada and at least 1 trip to Colorado. A family doctor once treated her for what was described as a mild bladder infection, but the procedure actually involved surgical repair of genital injuries. The same doctor reportedly saw other suspicious injuries, but never alerted authorities. And some people believe that's what's going on with JonBenet Ramsey with all of the doctor visits. Many of the assaults reportedly took place at parties during the Christmas holidays. At these parties, the source said, you know what else is weird? If the dates are all documented and all of these injuries are only occurring around Christmas time, what does that mean? Like year after year? Just Christmas or August, like the alleged dates in question, and no other times of the year? That's kind of weird. At these parties, the source said the sexual assaults usually began while the child was on the lap of a man dressed as Santa Claus. The Santa Claus character would begin the sexual contact by fondling the child before handing her over to the other adults. The woman was often introduced to adult men who were referred to as uncle, but they were not actually related to her. Those men invariably assaulted her, according to the source. The woman was often kept out of school around the holidays because of injuries and other trauma stemming from the assaults. She reportedly missed 45 days of school, much of it around Christmas, during one school year. When contacted Wednesday, Biankowski said her patient did not come up with the stories after the 96 slaying of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey. No, she did not, Biankowski said. 99% of what this client told me and wrote down was documented before 1995. See, this is curious because now you have a therapist here backing her up. You have a DA who's you have a DA official who's and was also a U.S. Assistant attorney, convinced that she's telling the truth. And her therapist is also convinced. And supposedly there's all this documentation. None of it's been released, of course. Supposedly it exists. What do all of the devout coincidence theorists say about all this? Like they're all lying? I mean, it's not like they released a book and went on talk shows all the time, did they? I mean, I don't recall that. If that is true, then okay, we can examine that. But if they didn't, I mean, this is all crazy. The woman making the allegations remains in hiding outside California. Her Boulder attorney, Lee Hill, has repeatedly said his client has been threatened and that he is concerned for her safety. And what would be his motivation to lie about all this? Assistant DA Bill Wise said on Monday authorities are taking the woman's claims very seriously. I mean, wow. This is crazy then. So she did not claim it was John Ramsey. She claimed it was Uncle Johnny, who's not And there is a Johnny Ramsey on the child sex offender list in California. So that backs her up as well, if it's the same guy. Again, I don't know. You know the other thing that's weird? Everybody's accusing her of being completely crazy and insane. Doesn't she have a right to be kind of crazy after being abused? If what she's saying is true, would you expect her to be a well-adjusted, completely sane individual? That's another thing. Like all these coincidence theorists, authority-worshipping cultists, these mentally weak Dunning-Kruger goofs who are too mentally weak to even consider the possibility that there's bad people in the world and there are conspiracies. They're just too mentally weak to consider the possibility that it is true, so they just want to write her off as crazy. Now, maybe she is crazy, but how does that disprove any of the claims that she's making? This is MINDSHOCK. I don't claim anything is true or untrue, but it's kind of weird. Like, all of these Dunning-Kruger coincidence theorists just hallucinating to know for sure that not only is she lying, she's certifiable. I mean, it's weird. Like, why is this conflation done? Why is this false dichotomy always engaged where, oh no, she's crazy? Well, how not crazy would you expect someone to be if the story is true? That's the real question is. And why is her therapist and this DA, like, she was able to hoodwink? Like, why are they just saying she's the most credible? There's all this evidence and documentation of all her claims prior. So she didn't know. So if this is all prior to JonBenet Ramsey's death, obviously she wouldn't know that Fleet White would have been involved in that. So if she's just making these claims about the White family and these other people, she has no idea that in the future JonBenet Ramsey would be killed and Fleet White would be a friend of John Ramsey. So she wouldn't know that, obviously. Yeah, I mean, this is really, really difficult. If all her claims about the garroting and all that, if that's all documented before 1995 as well, what does that mean? More details here. So, supposedly, John Ramsey's best friend was Fleet White. While Fleet was growing up, his father was molesting little girls with a garrote. So this is a comment by Troy on Quora. No one is saying that Fleet had anything to do with JonBenet's murder. However, Nancy Krebs said that her niece visited the Whites just before JonBenet's death. Nancy Krebs' niece also had a history of being abused with a garrote by Fleet's father. If JonBenet and Burke were playing with a garrote, it is possible the use of a garrote was a topic of conversation among the children, and it became the source of information for the choking game. When the police tried to interview the niece, she left the country. Okay, what does all this mean, though? Because if Nancy Krebs claimed this about her niece, she's fearing for her life. Her therapist backs her. This DA from California backs her. They try to verify the story, and her niece leaves the country. I mean, that's kind of weird. Clearly, there's a lot of people here fearing for their lives. So let's go more into Krebs' account here. 2kinvestigations.wordpress.com has this write-up, The Nancy Krebs Saga, Separating Fact from Fiction, Part 1, by The Professor. Posted January 27th, 2022, so quite recent here. One of the most perplexing and mysterious episodes of the JonBenet Ramsey saga was the case of Nancy Krebs, a California woman who came forward and made explosive claims against the family of Fleet and Priscilla White. This became one of the most vehemently debated subjects on the case, with some dismissing Krebs as a psychologically disturbed woman and nutcase. Well, here's the thing, though. If what she's saying is true, wouldn't she be expected to be such? I mean, I just can't let that go, because, like, it's just such a weird concept that coincidence theorists just can't grasp. And others saying that she deserved to be heard. Below, I have provided a brief summarization of the events surrounding the Krebs saga. I encourage you to draw your own conclusions. The following information was obtained from police interview transcripts, the Whites' public statements, and other open source methods. No media publications were relied on. The reader should remember that while some of Nancy Krebs' claims regarding the Ramsey case and her own sexual abuse were never proven to be true, there is, however, a lot that can be corroborated. Background: Nancy Krebs contacted Boulder-based lawyer Walter Leon Lee Hill after seeing him on television discussing the Ramsey case. Hill was commenting to reporters about how strange it was that the Boulder police did not want to see his deposition of John Ramsey. Hill had filed a lawsuit against John Ramsey and the National Enquirer on behalf of a Boulder photographer named Stephen Miles. Hill decided to represent Krebs and bring her to the attention of the Boulder authorities. The events that followed were not only strange and frightening, but at times extremely confusing. Hill and Denver-based journalist and author Stephen Singular met with District Attorney Alex Hunter and his office's chief investigator Linda Wickman on February 15, 2000. Hill stated that his witness had a lifelong relationship with the White family that could be proved, and she had information regarding child sexual abuse activities that could send the Whites to prison along with many other people. Hunter pressed both men for details, raising questions about potential motives, locations of where alleged crimes had occurred, and other areas of interest. Hill said that Fleet White Sr., father of Ramsey friend Fleet White Jr., had offered his witness $75,000 to keep her mouth shut and come visit him in Aspen, Colorado. Singular brought, and again, so, wow, this is pretty crazy. Singular brought up multiple aspects of the case that he believed warranted further investigation. He was entertaining the possibility that JonBenet had been perhaps killed outside of the home and then returned to one or both parents. Singular also encouraged Hunter's office to look into Chris Wolf again because he may have information about the crime and its perpetrators, even if he himself was not directly involved. Singular then theorized that JonBenet may have been killed in the presence of 3 people, one being Fleet White Jr., a second man who was a videographer in the Boulder area, and a third man who was the actual killer that did not reside in the area. With all of these sensational and unproven possibilities being presented to him, Hunter agreed to move forward. You know what's weird? I mean, we've been going over the theory that perhaps JonBenet Ramsey died earlier than alleged and possibly at a different location since the beginning. Would it explain some of the oddities in the case? But continuing on here, facts, Fleet White Sr. did own a property in Aspen, Colorado. Chris Wolf has no alibi for the night of the murder. Chris Wolf's girlfriend did suspect him of being involved in JonBenet's killing. The physical and forensic evidence does not indicate JonBenet was killed outside of her home. I mean, I don't know how they determined that definitively either way, though. But anyway, February 22nd, 2000, Lee Hill, Nancy Krebs, Alex Hunter, and detectives Trulio and Heidel sat down for a formal interview. Krebs presented the photographs in her possession and correctly identified all members of the White family. She then presented a letter from Nyla White, wife to Fleet White Sr. and mother to Fleet White Jr., that had been sent to Krebs' own grandmother. The detectives then commenced the background portion of the interview. Krebs stated that she knew the Whites since she was 3 years old and they were friends of the Krebs parents and grandparents. The detectives then turned their attention back to the letter from Nyla and noted that there are some subtle things going on here. Krebs states that when she neared the age of 4, Fleet White Sr. began to sexually assault her. Krebs then states that Lanny White, daughter of Fleet Sr. and Nyla, and sister to Fleet White Jr., was also present during the assaults. Krebs states that she believes Fleet White Jr. as a minor was made to do things to me. Krebs states that Fleet Sr. last assaulted her in August 1980 and that Fleet Jr. last assaulted her sometime between 1976 and 1978. The detectives then produced a photograph of a man's mugshot from California, and Krebs correctly identifies him as Mackie Boykin, a man who pled no contest to sexually assaulting her. Krebs then presents the will of her grandmother's second husband, which was witnessed and signed by Fleet Sr. and Nyla White. Krebs then makes a very interesting comment that is corroborated by her photographic evidence. She states that when she was younger, she had blonde hair and a slender body similar to JonBenet. Facts. Krebs states that the last time Fleet White Jr. sexually abused her was sometime between 76 and 79. Fleet White married Priscilla Brown in 1979. The letter from Nyla White to Krebs' grandmother further corroborates the two families' connections. The last will of Krebs' grandmother's second husband being signed by Fleet Sr. and Nyla White indicates trust and closeness between the two families. Krebs possessing family photographs of the Whites and being able to identify them by face indicates proximity and familiarity to and with them. Krebs having knowledge of Laney White being Fleet White Jr.'s sister, again, indicates having knowledge of the White family. An interesting comment here by Eagerly Waiting. Okay, so apparently this was not published. It states here this article was published January 27th, 2022, but comments are from June 2021, so maybe it was updated, but whatever. Eagerly Awaiting posted this. Thank you for your information. I've read that Nancy Krebs was found to be an unreliable source. Exactly, but who decided this and why? That's a very good question. She apparently was credible enough to put a pedo in prison based on her testimony a few years earlier. Can you imagine how different the case would have turned out if Nancy had not been dismissed? Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that is a great point. So an interesting thread here on the JonBenet Ramsey subreddit, on the JonBenet subreddit, regarding this article that I just read. Young girl Mac posted, honestly, the Krebs interviews by police also struck me as credible, and a lot of what she said checks out. Years later, some local municipal judge referenced 7 men that were there with JonBenet when she died in a deathbed confession. His last name was Morris, and I think a former InfoWars reporter named Ryan picked up the story about the judge. Affectionate Fly posted this. That article from Wickman about the conversations between Singular, Hill, Krebs, the counselor, and the Whites was quite a find. Does anyone know the complete list of people who attended the Christmas party? Nancy says that her mother had a sexual relationship with John Ramsey and that her mother was at the Christmas party. WTH, so much is redacted, I wish we knew what was written, and it would be great to have other similar sources like Wickman's. The question was posed, why would John cover for White if he knew he was involved in the murder? The answer was that John was also culpable. I could go on and on about this post. It's left me with more questions than answers. See, this is a good point, though, because if a situation like this is the truth, does that explain all of these insane anomalies and why people don't blow the whistle on each other? All intertwined in Boulder PD, judge connections, all these political connections, and possible ring of some kind of satanic enterprise of some sort. Another post from this site here. I guess crime scene isn't the right word for it. Perhaps cover-up scene is better. Like you, I think they were there in the early morning helping stage a crime scene at the Ramsey home to make believe that she had been killed there when it actually happened elsewhere. You know what just occurred to me, too, from the 911 call? If Burke is in the background and they're saying, what did you find? If there's a mass staging involving the Whites as well, I mean, is it something innocent like Burke left a toy out or broke a toy or did something bad and he thinks is there a way to explain away Burke in the 911 call if he's not responsible for JonBenet Ramsey's death in any way? Because if it's a situation like that, I mean, that could be an explanation there. So, yeah, to make everyone believe that she had been killed there when it actually happened elsewhere. They either left and were called right back in keeping up with the cover story, or perhaps they never really left at all. In any case, I do think that part of their reason for the Whites, Fernies, Hoverstock, and Dr. Buff wanting to be there into the late morning, early afternoon before JonBenet was found is that they wanted to have an explanation if any forensic evidence linking them to the staged crime scene turned up. There could have been other reasons, too, like handling Patsy. We definitely do have different thoughts on Linda Arndt. I'm curious, what makes you think she wasn't honest? Personally, I feel like she was one of the few honest cops in Boulder PD who were honest, which is why her reputation was destroyed the most out of anyone there. She had what I thought was a good instinct about John Ramsey and also extended her suspicion to everyone else in the house when she noted that no one but her seemed to care about 10 a.m. passing with no phone call. Plus, she even reported fearing that her life was in danger from high-level officers in the BPD like John Eller and Tom Kobe, which is very telling. I think she was hung out to dry that morning by the police department and made to handle a crime scene entirely on her own with tons of people milling about despite repeatedly calling for backup. Okay, I mean, we are so far into MINDSHOCK land here. I mean, my brain is starting to rattle because if this theory is true, and I'm about to introduce a new McGuire theory. I have my previous McGuire theory where the parents thought Burke did it, but he didn't, and they're innocent in all this. This is McGuire theory 2. Everyone is complicit. If there is some kind of satanic ring or whatever's going on here with all of these corrupt officials, is it really plausible that Boulder PD is really this inept and incompetent? Does it make more sense that Arndt was intentionally left out to dry, as this comment is stating here? Does that make more sense knowing that the scene was completely compromised and contaminated by all these parties? And if the upper echelons of Boulder PD are somehow connected to this conspiracy and where some of their members might have been present or at least know about this ring of these so-called elites that like to engage in this type of activity, they know this is never going to be solved, so they just throw Arndt out to dry. And they intentionally botch the whole thing knowing it'll never be solved. I mean, that's the new McGuire theory, because does that make the most sense? Now here's the new aspect of the McGuire theory, too. Is it possible people connected to Ramsey or Boulder PD, whatever. Is it possible that they anticipated? I'm not clear on the timeline here because obviously it's impossible without knowing more information. But is it plausible? Is it plausible? I mean, what if they suspected? I mean, this is so hard to really go down these rabbit holes because, again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue here. Is it possible if they foresaw JonBenet Ramsey possibly being killed or at least injured severely through these parties, is it possible, or I don't know what the timeline is, maybe it was after she was dead, is it possible they actually contacted or made it to look like the Pew theory where they involved the housekeeper, Pew, her husband, all of these criminal elements around Boulder like Helgoth, Gygax, all these guys, were they the cover story? Was there really some kind of contact made between certain entities and this ring? Pew, Gygax, Kennedy, Helgoth, made it to look like they could have been hired for some kind of kidnap job in order to cover up this illicit sex party where things went wrong involving Boulder PD or some kind of government officials of some kind. Would that check all the boxes? Would that account for all the variables? I'm just asking that question. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. But that's McGuire theory number 2 at this point. After reading all of this and going down all these rabbit holes, I mean, is it really possible that there's this level of incompetence, or is it all by design? All of this conflation and obfuscation to ensure that this is never solved. Anyway, continuing this post here, Tal Jones is a very interesting character in all of this. He is the son of OSS and Army Intelligence Officer Albert Hedding Sprague, who ended up remarrying to Alice Kristoff, Nancy Krebs' mother, making Tal Nancy's step-uncle. Tal, who was living in Boulder, got involved in the Ramsey case from the beginning, joining the online forums to post primarily Burke Did It theories as Spade. Per one account, Tal was working as a paralegal in the Boulder law office of Thomas Cecil Doc Miller, then boyfriend of Ramsey family friend Judith Phillips, and came into the office the day after JonBenet's murder to announce that Fleet White had told him that Burke killed JonBenet. Likely due to his association with Miller, Tal boasted of being well connected to the darker side of Boulder's political judicial network, which apparently involved drugs and blackmail. Now, you know what's crazy? I mean, does this all validate this alleged account from the judge? This is crazy. Tal even bragged about having Tom Haney, a former Denver cop who was assisting the Boulder police, as an inside source. When Nancy Krebs was considering coming forward, Tal was one of the people who approached her and tried getting her not to. His subsequent attacks on Nancy and continued pushing of Ramsey did it theory, largely Burke did it, narratives online made people see him as Fleet White's henchman of sorts. Reportedly, Alice even said at one point that she wouldn't be surprised if Tal or her stepson was involved in murdering JonBenet. Now, how damning are these accounts if true? I mean, this is all absolutely insane. So here's a super random post from a blog, strangerinaJewishWorld.blogspot.com, from October 26, 2020, a look at Tal Jones. There is another character in the JonBenet Ramsey murder mystery that I have not covered up to this point, and that is Tal Jones. I have not discussed him because I have not seen him as being really relevant to the murder, but after seeing his name come up a number of times in the research of other people, I guess it's time for me to do a post about him as part of doing due diligence in exploring every possible avenue of research that might shed better light on the truth. So in this post, I will be doing my little expose on Tal Jones and how he fits into the big picture. Just who is Tal Jones and where does he fit in everything I've discussed about the JonBenet Ramsey case on my blog? Talfrin Jones is the eldest son of Albert Sprague. Albert Sprague was the second husband of Alice Kristoff, so Tal Jones is Nancy Krebs' step-uncle and is Gwen Krebs Boykin's stepsister. You know, is this all too much coincidence for some people? I mean, that's awfully coincidental on how dialed in Nancy Krebs' step uncle is in the Boulder scene. Tal Jones is nicknamed Spade by a lot of researchers for whatever reason. Tal Jones has been actively involved in spreading BDI posts on JBR forums. There is speculation that Tal Jones knows the Whites perhaps intimately. He also knows Nancy Krebs. Nancy Krebs said that Tal Jones is one of the people who tried to get her to keep quiet about her story and not tell it to Boulder officials. Now, an anonymous poster said, "Is it true that he is Fleet White's half-brother as well?" And if that's true, what would that mean? I mean, this is all crazy. This is all absolutely insane. By crazy, I don't mean untrue. Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. It's just, see, there's a problem with a case that has this much evidence and is still unsolved. That means that it seems very possible that there's some variables we're not seeing, and therefore any theory would have to account for all these known and unknown variables in order to make sense. A MindShock listener on the bigfooty.com forums, gg.exe, posted this, which is a curious comment that kind of sums up a lot of this shady business regarding all of this. It is very, very dark stuff here. I don't want to insert links to other blogs and forums too much on here. Don't want to break any site rules about such, but on the first page of the Professor's JBR thread, someone else posts a link to their own blog site covering the JBR case, and so I clicked that and started reading through it. It's very good, leans completely to a pedophile angle. Based on Nancy Krebs, or whatever her name is, who was there at the party, also 5 years of age, and says it was a sex party. That blog goes through evidence, rumors, and hearsay and connections to a pedophile network, Ramsey, Whites, and many others who share their children around type thing. Like the Professor's site goes into finding connections with all these people in Boulder, in and around the Ramsey network where pedophilia is rife. Going into Patsy herself, sexually abused by high-up military father. John Ramsey himself involved in shady things in the Philippines, etc. Anyway, to cut to the chase, from the others blog site was a link to a YouTube video about how a brand new last photo of JonBenet Ramsey was recently released, and why was it being held secret for so long. It shows JonBenet Ramsey at the Whites' Christmas party, aka the sex party, wearing the outfit pretty much she was wearing when she was found dead. I don't know if that's true. And a distinctive hair tie she was wearing when she was found dead, photographed by the police at the crime scene. They also highlight how Patsy was wearing the exact same clothes that morning as what she was wearing the night before. No one does that. Her whole story was that they all came home, readied for bed, and went to sleep. Yet here we have JonBenet Ramsey's last photo alive, showing she's in the same clothes and hair tie as her murder scene, and Patsy wearing the same clothes the night before. They also highlight how John once accidentally slipped up. Quote, "There were a lot of people here at 3 a.m., end quote, during the investigation or interview. And remember how John called his friends, the circle of people involved at the party the night before, to come over when the ransom note was found." I actually can't find a source for that lot of people here at 3 a.m. quote, but... Also, someone commenting on the last photo mentions how obvious it looks like she's just finished giving oral sex to an adult. I mean, I don't see that as she could have just been crawling over a couch like kids do. I don't know. So the prevailing thought is that clearly JonBenet Ramsey was killed that night during or after the sex party, either accidentally or premeditated, and everyone stayed around for a while to help cover up that party, get rid of photos, remove evidence, wipe things down, create a ransom cover story that her dead body at the Whites was transported to the basement later, etc. The only issue I have with all of this is Fleet White is a central figure to the story, but Fleet White reported he looked in the wine cellar at 8 a.m. and saw nothing, only for John to find JonBenet Ramsey in the wine cellar at 1 p.m. Also, how White's wife got suspicious and upset with Patsy when she tried to claim the damage to the butler's pantry door was new, and how an intruder could have got in when White's wife knew the damage was there for ages before. Same with the broken window being initially said to be new, but was there since June. The Whites and Ramseys ended up breaking friendship, so did another family. As they grew suspicious, the family was lying about stuff. The blog site author does say something I wholeheartedly believe, though. Quote, "The staging of the Ramsey home was done by very intelligent but deceptive people for the purpose of pointing suspicion for the murder in as many different directions as possible, but away from the truth," end quote. I believe that because when I researched this through MindShock and other sites, there are so many suspects, so much evidence that goes in many different directions that backs up an array of different overarching theories and possible suspects. To me, and as I posted on MindShock Channel's episode 9, if he hasn't deleted that too. Quick aside here, I do not delete comments. YouTube removes them for spam. So if your comment disappeared, just post it 2 or 3 times. I do not delete them. That is YouTube. So just continuing on here, there is so much of that in this case that can only point to being a coordinated collective effort to the murder and to covering things up, including the police. Whether by accident or not, whether the family or someone out for revenge on John for not doing something, there are dozens of sure thing suspects, all with their own smoking gun evidence. That means there isn't a solitary suspect, but a collective effort. Many people involved in various ways. A mastermind, a killer, a couple of lookouts, an info gatherer, someone to scope the house, someone to keep track of police and distract them, someone to help clean up the house and destroy crime scene evidence, take evidence secretly out of the house, etc. Okay. So as the McGuire 2 theory here, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't jump to they were all directly involved. It might be more likely, maybe, again, I'm not alleging this is true, that this circle, possibly not even the Ramseys, to protect all of this, whatever you want to call it, satanic ring of child abuse, they hired these lowly criminals. That way they would just possibly take the fall for it if certain evidence needed to be framed up as such, but mostly just to obfuscate and make sure it never got solved, because you have this just, the Pew Crew theory is just so weird on how a lot of this evidence seems to line up. But if that was all by design, does that make even more sense that these random, I mean, I don't know, it's a tough one. I mean, this case truly is one of the most mind-shocking cases ever. Marion number 1 also posted this. It seems likely to me that the whole drama of John Ramsey and Fleet White turning on each other was to save their own asses after they were put under the spotlight. Fleet probably figured he could deflect the attention away from himself by making it look like the Ramseys, particularly Burke, were the sole culprits, covertly using henchmen of his like Tal Jones and I suspect Thomas Cecil Doc Miller to push these narratives while assailing the Boulder DA's office for a cover-up protecting the Ramseys. John, conversely, has hinted at the guilt of every one of his former friends, especially Fleet, while acting as if the Boulder police have been conspiring against him and his family. Okay, see, that's another interesting point that doesn't get talked about. I mean, John Ramsey really did seem to throw everyone under the bus at one point or another, including the guy that sheltered him, Pasta J's co-owner. I mean, all of this is just so insane. But, I mean, how many cases has there been when someone literally burned every single bridge they had with all of these supposed people? Now, if they're all guilty of something, and is it possible that John Ramsey really is not guilty of anything involving his daughter, but he is involved in some kind of crime or corruption in these upper political circles, whether drug-related or business-related through Access Graphics, IBM, government contracts, whatever, that he's super dirty with all these other people, and he really did not pimp out his daughter and all of this never happened, and he really did care about his daughter, but he clearly can't blow the whistle on all of this upper crime ring. Would that be a reason why he just threw everybody under the bus, because he just got so fed up with all of that, and he really wasn't actually guilty in what happened to his daughter directly? Is that a possibility? He's kind of hard to read. I mean, I do have to admit, he's pretty difficult to read. But I don't know if I could think of any other case where a parent of a murdered child behaved like he did. But continuing this comment here, or maybe it was even largely for show. Looking at their actions in tandem, it feels like John and Fleet were pushing equal and opposite narratives of the case, designed to force observers of the case to choose between two false narratives. Only one of the Ramseys did it, RDI, and everyone else is totally innocent, or an intruder did it, IDI, and the Ramseys are totally innocent. Maybe they were fueling an intentional false dichotomy. I like this guy's terminology, false dichotomy, logical fallacy right there, and laughing it up behind the scenes. You also have some weird actions where both sides appear to defend each other even after their apparent split. John denied under oath in the deposition for the Stephen Miles case that any altercation happened with Fleet in Atlanta, despite multiple witnesses and his own words in his his own book he later published. Fleet and his wife initially backed Mary Keenan and the new Boulder DA, even though Keenan was involved in an incident of the DA's office trying to gain unauthorized access to war room police files, and their supposed ally at the Boulder PD, Steve Thomas, although Steve Thomas thoroughly despised Keenan as corrupt. Nancy Krebs' lawyer, Lee Hill, opined that, quote, the breakdown of communication between the families was just superfuge. Or is that supposed to be subterfuge? And much of the separation, I guess these are typos, was for show, just an apparent separation. He also expressed a belief that the Ramseys and the Whites knew each other long before their first official meeting in Boulder, 1994, which I believe to be the case. So, okay, I mean, we've gone down so many rabbit holes here. I mean, this is just insanity. But some kind of overarching conspiracy, I mean, that could explain all of it, could it not? All right, now, I mean, just if you think that's not enough rabbit holes, let's go down another one. Searching Girl on the JonBenet subreddit also posted this regarding the Whites trying to find out what was in the files. They were probably curious about what was disclosed. Regardless, maybe the Whites are suspicious for another reason. Conspiracy theories abound in Boulder, and please don't shoot the messenger, but I have heard Nicole Kidman was in Boulder that night, and there was an eyes wide shut type scenario going on at the Whites that included Jill Zane Maxwell. And before people think she threw Maxwell in here for no reason, there is that famous photograph, allegedly, of Jill Zane Maxwell with JonBenet Ramsey at a pageant. And, of course, she has the local Colorado lawyers, happens to be the same firm that John Ramsey employs. And who knows how many of these other individuals have the same law firm as well. All coincidental, I'm sure. Think about this. Kidman was married to Tom Cruise at the time. He owned a ranch in Telluride. Who was the marshal there at the time, and what if the Whites paid someone to make sure this murder is never solved and prosecuted? Like I said, I'm just relaying the story, but I'm at the point where nothing would surprise me anymore. So I don't know where this information comes from that Nicole Kidman was in Boulder that night, but the thing about Kidman and her father, I mean, there are so many conspiracy theories. And then, of course, the Tom Cruise dialed into Hollywood, all of those scenarios. I mean, all of these people have the same lawyers. I mean, this is just insane. Man, let's keep going down the rabbit hole then here. Affectionate Fly posted this. Don't even get me started on the Eyes Wide Shut lead. Remember the part in the movie where Tom was buying his costume at the store called Rainbow Costumes? There was a part where the owner's underage daughter came out. It was implied that perhaps the owner of the store was also renting his daughter out. It is rumored that the section of Kubrick's movie that was cut out was a scene where the Satanists rape and sacrifice a child, as in That Child from the Rainbow Shop. Now let's go back and remember some of the weird lies Patsy told. Remember Patsy denying writing in the baby picture book, Rainbow Game Players? It was most likely her handwriting. Why lie and try to distance herself from what she wrote? I don't have the answer, but I did start Googling everything to do with rainbows. That is what led me to the scene in Eyes Wide Shut. Then I found a kid's book. It's called The Rainbow Fish, which has an accompanying workbook called Rainbow Fish Game. The story is about a beautiful fish with unique scales that make her more beautiful than the other fish. She decides to take off all her scales and gives them to her friends. Thereafter, she feels naked and empty, but she is encouraged because now she has many more friends. Then I Googled rainbow and sex games. You don't even have to know about a rainbow kiss or rainbow sex. The rainbow kiss game is where teen girls are encouraged to wear different colors of lipstick and gives the guys in the room oral sex. I know, gross and sneaky. I'm not going to pretend to know what perverts and pedos do behind closed doors to get the kids to go along with the plan, but I suspect other like-minded people know exactly what the symbolism means. Also, and possibly totally unrelated, do you know what a rainbow girl is? They are a group of organized within the Freemasons. And guess who was a rainbow girl? Yup, Patsy. Her dad was a high-ranking Mason. I read that this was the organization that introduced Patsy and John. I know that later Patsy became one of those Freemason ladies of the Eastern Star. I forget the correct name. Okay, can anybody verify all that? I don't even know if I want to keep going down some of these rabbit holes. Samar Candy posted this. When I first came to the case, although I never thought Fleet had been involved in the murder of JonBenet, I did think he had been sexually abusing her prior to her murder. But I changed my mind about that. I think he was protecting members of his family who were involved, the ones who came over from California for Christmas. I do believe Nancy's evidence about him, which I think she said he was involved in her abuse along with his father and his associates, but stopped around the time he was in his late teens. Then there were those missing years of his and even the use of a different name. Did he try to break away from his family then and then try to lead a clean life? And it was very unfortunate that his relatives came to visit him in December 96. I wonder if he was happy to welcome them or if he was forced to accommodate them. That's an interesting theory as well. I mean, we're going down every single possible rabbit hole. I mean, we really don't talk enough about people who are criminals or had criminal pasts or illicit pasts, and they really do try to change their way, or their ways, and they are dragged back in by family members or pressure that they can't fight off for whatever reason. Does that lead to more anomalies in the cases? Someone needs to research his life and who he associated with in all the years he and Priscilla lived in Boulder. In my opinion, I don't even think I even know the year it was when they arrived. Was it when Fleet the Third was born? Benny Baku posted this. Fleet really does have a murky past. John nor Patsy knew exactly what he did for a living. They weren't rich. Priscilla worked. And his reaction post-murder was beyond bizarre. His behavior read to me desperate and fear-driven. Now, how do we know that John nor Patsy knew what he did for a living? Did they say they didn't know while they did know? I mean, can we trust anything anybody says? Fleet cozied up to Steve Thomas quickly. Steve Thomas was a weak link to protect his secret. Thomas was good for it. I don't think he was involved in the murder. Merv Pugh and his connection puts him on the top of my list. Affectionate Fly posted this. Agreed. Let's just say the worst case scenario about the Whites is true. Can you imagine being besties with these kind of people? Sorry, there is something to be said about the company you keep. Birds of a feather flock together. I feel like I would sense in my soul if someone was at the very least vulgar. How much more so a father-son generational pedo family? Surely instincts would tell you something eventually. Search and Girl posted this. Nothing surprises me anymore. The father in Aspen and the son in Boulder is too convenient. So many celebrities pass through Aspen. Filthy, rich, fat cats. I can totally believe a pedo ring passes through there. I struggle with John Ramsey's involvement in such a thing, but if someone was operating on a revenge and or blackmail scenario, it might be motive for the crime. So Affectionate Fly actually... Okay, so they posted this... I just noticed this comment on MINDSHOCK. I worked in Marietta, Georgia in the early 2000s. I used to wax a group of girls' eyebrows. They were friends with Burke. They all went to the private school Lavette. All 3 or 4 of them told me that Burke told them that a business deal of his dad's went bad, and they were the ones that killed JonBenet. They also said Burke was very nice. I suspect John was into some shady business and Lockheed could not afford for an investigation to be conducted on John or his business. Now, there's a little bit more in-depth conversation or in-depth description here by Affectionate Fly on the subreddit. Okay, this is hearsay. I lived in Marietta, Georgia, worked at a day spa waxing around 2000-ish. One day, a group of 3 or 4 high school girls came in to get their eyebrows waxed. They went to school with Burke. They told me that he told them his dad had a business deal that went sour and that they were responsible for the murder of JonBenet. And not that this has anything to do with anything, but one day I came face to face with John Ramsey at a barbecue place during lunch. It was one of those random moments you don't forget. He looked at me like, do I know you? And I did the same. It dawned on me about 10 minutes later who he was. See, this is also very interesting because I think a lot of cases could be solved if they simply interview a lot of even friends and acquaintances at the kids' possible witnesses or possible POI family members' schoolmates. Because kids talk, teenagers talk, even if they're just offhand comments. Now, again, Burke might have said that because he believed it was true or he heard his dad talking about it, possibly as a cover. So I don't know if he would just randomly say that to random girls to try to deflect attention away from either himself or his family. It seems more likely he believed it was true, even if it wasn't. So as far as he knew, perhaps that's what he believes is true. So apparently in the 1998 interview with Fleet White, he said that he didn't work. He didn't know he didn't know what? And he didn't know how they made the living. Priscilla mentioned they had a budget. Regarding what John Ramsey said, that neither as in John Ramsey's 1998 interview, he said that neither Priscilla nor Fleet worked. Here's another excellent post by Affectionate Fly in response to someone asking, hasn't Fleet White supposedly pushed the Ramseys to say what they know? Affectionate Fly posted this. I have thought about this. Think big picture. What if the powers that be, who have an interest in helping to cover up this story, created a spin to take the investigation away from the true perpetrator? How would you do that? Perhaps make it look like the Whites were against the Ramseys and earnestly wanted to see justice prevail. What if the spin crew wanted to point the guilt at the Ramseys over the Whites, with the idea that it would lead people away from some big pedo ring cover-up? I'm just rolling with this idea. What if Fleet White Sr. and Jr. were heavily involved in some organized kiddie porn, etc.? If they went down, then all the others would be implicated like dominoes. I want to know why the girl accusing Fleet White was not credible. Who says she wasn't? She was credible enough to put one pedo in prison. Her counselor put her own life and career in jeopardy with the idea of helping other kids. She was eaten up with pain and venereal diseases while talking to police. They had to continually hide her in new places while she was in Boulder. Why? I read the deposition. It was unsettling, but what do people expect? If this happened, it's not going to be a pretty story. You know what else is kind of weird? Going back to the 911 call, the official story was that Fleet White accidentally dialed it. This was at the Ramsey home 3 days before JonBenet's body was found. So was there another type of sex party or whatever, some kind of satanic abuse or whatever is going on? Did someone want to blow the whistle? Is it possibly one of the children wanted to blow the whistle and something they interfered with it? Is it possible that 911 call somehow spiraled into something else and people getting afraid? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. The thing about, is it even 100% verified that he was the one who made the call? I mean, obviously there's sources that claim that he did in the Ramseys, but yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird. Also, what's weird is Nancy Krebs also claimed this was all videotaped, as well as other sources, particularly those that there are theorists who claim that Bill McReynolds was somehow involved and there is a videotape on the dark web. Well, Nancy Krebs was claiming this was all videotaped before any of these theories ever came to light. I mean, and one of these individuals is Thera Kuhn. And I went over some of their posts previously on Conspiracy NOPOL. They posted JonBenet Ramsey and the pedophile network responsible for her murder. I mean, this goes into a lot of things, including North Fox Island. I've covered all of this on previous episodes, so check those out. I mean, this one's already getting pretty long, so I'm only going to go over the relevant point here in relation to what we're talking about. Others have come forward speaking about abuse relating to John Ramsey's friends, such as Fleet White. Nancy Krebs spoke of abuse, and her story mirrors a similar story perpetuated by Kathy O'Brien, who spoke about her experiences on Beaver Island, of which John Ramsey allegedly frequented and on at least one occasion allegedly took a ferry with his daughter to. According to her, an operation was set up on Beaver Island that centered around the sexual exploitation of young girls. Beaver Island is very close to the Tri-Island area near North Fox Island, with it being Beaver Island, South and North Fox Islands. John Ramsey was also said to have been on a ferry with Kathy O'Brien's father, but the veracity of her comment on this has never been proven. She claimed many things that line up with this is how this network operated. And I mean, just when you think there can't be any more rabbit holes, I will just add this here too, because, I mean, if it's so common for crazy kooks to come out of the woodwork with these types of stories, because clearly Krebs has established some credibility in terms of who she was and connections with the Whites, and putting away one pedophile, even if she made that story up, whatever, she's got some kind of credible baseline for association with the Fleet family at minimum. If this is so common, though, of crazy people coming out of the woodwork to accuse random people of this kind of satanic videoed abuse, why haven't we seen more of it? I mean, if there's that many crazy people out there, why do we have almost no examples of people like this? And I'm not going to get into John Mark Carr here, but some people allege that he was also involved in some kind of online network of these scumbags, and he possibly even saw a JonBenet Ramsey video, and this was his version of blowing the whistle. in his deranged, demented mind, this is what he came up with, claiming that he was maybe responsible. I mean, look, if we're going down every rabbit hole possible, is it possible some of these scum actually pay money for these types of tapes and they wanted something done to JonBenet Ramsey? So even though they weren't present at location, they like ordered a request for some kind of video and it was done and she happened to die, even if that wasn't the intention. I mean, we're talking about the lowest of the low scum in the world that would obviously be involved in this. But if this is true, and they are, does that explain why so many wackos have claimed to have killed her? Are they simply part of this online dark web network? Now, some people, of course, do not find Kathy O'Brien credible. So she claims to have been a victim of government mind control programs like Project Monarch, CIA's Project MK Ultra, and yeah, I mean, she's authored all these books, so some people believe she's not credible, whereas I don't know if Nancy Krebs is coming out with books and doing all these appearances. And Kathy O'Brien, of course, has made some really, really bold claims. So, yeah, I mean, including, obviously, these sex slaves rings, child abuse, and also presidents using hologram technology, etc., etc. Her claim is actually interesting because she claims that they're using hologram technology to make themselves look like reptilian shapeshifters. That's an interesting one, is it not? It's like the Operation Bluebeam version of David Icke. Because if David Icke's research is all legit and all of the witnesses are telling the truth in terms of they witnessed somebody glitching and turning into a reptilian alien, if that's all man-made technology, they could pass all these lie detector tests or whatever and appear credible because they are credible. That's what they saw. That doesn't mean that interdimensional alien shapeshifters are real. That just means they appeared to be using some kind of technology. But, yeah, I mean, Beaver Island is another... I mean, that's another huge rabbit hole. Here's a post by Conscious Language 92. There are also, I believe, many connections or clues between the Ramsey case and the Oakland County child killer case in regard to details of places and dates, the age of children, etc. For example, Jill Robinson abducted Wednesday, December 26, 76, exactly 20 years to the day of JonBenet. Both girls murdered. Both cases involve specifically bikes, Christmas, snow, both clothed. Jill was age 12, JonBenet size 12 underwear. Both names start with the letter J. JonBenet was found with beaver hairs on her hand. Jill was found next to Beaver Road sign. JonBenet lived at 755 15th Street. Jill was found on I-75 highway, both with the numbers. John Ramsey's house in Charlevoix is directly opposite Beaver Island. He chose the house numbers in Boulder, Colorado. He chose the J in JonBenet as in JonBenet Ramsey. Studied at Michigan University, an hour from all the victims' location when discovered. Owned a plane, owned a business called Access Graphics, $1 billion business. Sarah Cohn also posted this. I go over a lot in my previous series relating to how the International Access Graphics headquarters were set up in child trafficking hotbeds, including the same vicinity as Frances Sheldon was currently living. What the heck is this? Lady Frolic posted this. I agree with you. It's more than a coincidence. James Dudley J. Ramsey gave Frank Sheldon permission to build a landing strip on North Fox. Their connection isn't Ann Arbor, though. John Ramsey went to Michigan State in Lansing for both undergrad and a master's, not U of M. The link could have been pedophilic, aeronautic, and or Charlevoix. Sheldon owned land in Charlevoix, and I believe the Ramseys summered there in the 60s and 70s. Sheldon was between the ages of father and son. He could have befriended both. It wouldn't require blackmail if they were all like-minded. I mean, that's kind of insane, though, if the Ramseys were linked to North Fox Island specifically through different family members and that area. And then also Beaver Island there, directly across from the Charlevoix house. Wow. Okay, Theracoon posted this. This is really one for the coincidence theorists who think that snuff films aren't real and, you know, or there's no actual attempt to create them. Theracoon posted this. Take, for example, the website Mariana's Web. The website featured 28,000 members who actively shared materials. 28,000. They arrested 3 people not far from where I am in Michigan for a plot to kidnap, rape, and kill a child from a carnival in the area, all on videotape so they could sell it on the dark web. They were one of the few groups who were caught. In this group, there were 2 men and a woman, proving it's not just a boys' club either. I mean, this is insane. And for those that think this is a fake post, again, like a lot of these so-called conspiracy theorists posting on Reddit, when you vet them, it turns out to be true. WZZM13.com on the ABC News here. It was actually 4 people arrested in plot to kidnap, rape, and murder a child. Matthew Toole and Talia Furman among them. I mean, this is insane. This was September 21st, 2018. So, I mean, this is just absolutely insane. And John Ramsey's father was Dudley Ramsey, who was implicated in North Fox Island. Let's go over another interesting post circling back to the Judge Long's alleged comments here. This comment is by Benny Baku. It is unfortunate corruption and greed's tentacles suck the life out of the good of the people. It's not just Boulder, but everywhere where there is money and power to be had. They are intertwined in our political system, our government, and in every global nation on this earth. In order to save the people and the good of the people, you need to cut the head off the snake. No one is willing to do it because they'll probably end up dead, or they are knee-deep in the evil corruption that only money can buy. They are content with selling their souls to the devil. That's the one thing to bring this case is an example of how sick the rich are, John Ramsey being one of the elite in Boulder. He wasn't, and the circle of friends they had weren't either. We don't know much about the Fleet's wealth or lack of, but Priscilla has the career while Fleet stayed home. With that in mind, the Fleets may have been comfortable financially with Priscilla working, but they didn't have money to throw around. Their friends in Boulder really didn't run with the rich and famous of Boulder, Colorado. Really, the Ramseys didn't always have money. They built the company as a family. I don't know how much of that is true based on John Ramsey's father, but this is a bit off the subject, but while I'm here, I think people should be reminded of the importance as far as Patsy is concerned. People like to point out how Patsy was really, really good at spending John's money. It wasn't his money, it was their money. She worked equally hard at building the company to the level that it was attracting a huge secretive company like Lockheed Martin. When they were first in Boulder, she was working for the company, but then she got cancer. Cancer changed her perspective on what was truly important, their children. The company was off and running. It was time for Patsy to invest her time to the most important asset they had, the kids. She did, and she was happy, and she could have had that opportunity. Not everyone can without financial sacrifice. Back to my issue with the pedophile rings and why I find it a dangerous diversion to this case. There was and is no evidence John Ramsey was involved in such a depraved network. This was a homicide. Why the Ramseys and JonBenet were chosen, we don't know. We don't know because we don't have the missing piece, the intruder and or intruders. Until then, to spend energies on far-fetched theories that take people down rabbit holes serves no purpose except take you down rabbit holes of no return. Well, unless some of the rabbit holes are true. As far as whether this judge did or didn't state this, just messes with the mind and focus of who did this. Then I wonder how in the world did pedophile rings enter into this narrative? Children are murdered by psycho pedos all too often, but how in the world does a ring of wealthy and powerful pedophiles come into play in this homicide, whereas in the murders of children in this country, such theories don't come into play? Well, and how many? In some of them they would, some of them they wouldn't, right? What is it in the JonBenet case that fosters these theories? Was it because the Ramseys are wealthy? Was it because of the pageants? Was it because of the national coverage? Or, like the BDI theory fills in the weaknesses of the RDI theory, the PRDI, the pedophile ring theory, fills in the weaknesses in the IDI theory. The PRDI theory explains why the intruder wasn't and will not be found. They are protected by the cops and the Boulder elite, who's protected by those up the political ladder. I have ranted enough. This will be the last I say about that. I mean, a lot of interesting points there. I mean, really, if they want this thing solved, they should just brain fingerprint scan for all remaining people. But this, I mean, going down these darkest of dark rabbit holes, I mean, it's just... It's really tough because it seems like nothing makes sense no matter where you look. And is it all by design? Because this vast conspiracy, as crazy as it might seem, doesn't explain everything. Now, obviously, without definitive hard evidence, you can't claim that it's true. And I'm not claiming it's true. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. This is, of course, MINDSHOCK, where we attempt not to fall for any logical fallacies of any kind. But if it's true and it explains all the variables, what are we supposed to do? Ignore it? I mean, obviously evidence is needed, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt if we're going to criminal court. Now, this rumor of there being some kind of a snuff film on the dark web, if there's truth to it, you would think someone would have found it by now. Obviously, that's not something I mess with. I have zero interest in the dark web. That just sounds way too insane for me, not just regarding any kind of possible murders caught on video, but just the very nature of it in general. It just seems weird. I don't know. It just seems way too weird. There's too much of a criminal element across the board. But people who have been on the dark web, they can chime in here on how all that stuff works. I actually did an episode on the dark web with JR. You can check that out on MindShock. It's an older episode. We didn't get into the JonBenet Ramsey case, of course, or even other cases, just the general idea of criminals operating in the shadows, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, this really is a one-of-a-kind case. You just don't see this many rabbit holes in other cases. So is it really possible that it's all mere coincidence that there's just even this many rabbit holes? I don't know. What do all the MindShock listeners think about this? Chime in the comments section. Obviously, we have way more suspects to go over. This was a long one, but there's seemingly an endless amount of rabbit holes and suspects, each with an assortment of variables that can and cannot be dismissed. So definitely very, very mind-shocking across the board. So I hope everybody found another edition of MindShock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.